When the world outside descends into chaos, people chase money, power, and fame to feel secure. Yet the more they gain, the emptier they feel. In an age where everything can be taken away in an instant, only one thing remains untouchable: a mind trained for peace. Stoic philosophy never promised freedom from suffering. It teaches us how to walk through it unbroken. It reminds us that true freedom doesn't come from controlling the world, but from mastering ourselves. When we learn to observe instead of react, to feel gratitude instead of resentment, and to accept instead of escape, we not only find serenity, but the strength to live freely amid the storm. From the moment humankind began to fear what it could not control, death, disease, loss, betrayal, it also began searching for another kind of freedom, one not born of power or wealth, but of the soul. Stoic philosophy was born in that world, a turbulent age of war, hunger, and injustice. Yet amid the chaos, there were those who chose a different path, not to rule the world, but to rule themselves. They understood that we cannot control the wind, but we can adjust our sails. We cannot stop the storms of fate, but we can learn to pass through them with calm and wisdom. And in that very struggle, the Stoics found a freedom no tyrant could ever take away: inner freedom. Epictetus, a slave in chains, was one of the freest men who ever lived. He understood something that even the powerful often never learn: no one can harm you unless you allow it. Though his body was imprisoned, his mind remained untouched, for he knew that shackles could bind his limbs, but never his reason. In cold, damp chambers, he taught his students that freedom does not come from escaping the prison, but from escaping the enslaving thoughts within one's own mind. He warned, "When you are angry, you have surrendered the keys of your soul to another." And therein lies the tragedy of humanity, when we willingly trade our mental freedom for fleeting emotions. The Stoics saw this clearly, and they chose the harder path, the path of self-mastery. Seneca, Rome's philosopher of high birth, faced his own trials: betrayal, exile, and finally, an enforced death. Yet he wrote to his friends with serenity, "No one truly lives long, only deeply." To him, life was not measured in years, but in the depth of understanding and tranquility of the mind. He viewed death not as an enemy, but as a natural part of life's order. And because of that, he left the world without fear, his mind at peace with destiny. The Stoics saw that true freedom does not come from avoiding pain, but from accepting it as part of the universe's design. When we stop resisting what must be, we discover a peace that cannot be destroyed. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, embodied this spirit. He ruled Rome during an era of crisis, surrounded by war and plague. Yet the words he left behind were not about power, but about stillness. In Meditations, he wrote, "When the world around you is in chaos, retreat within. There you will find a wellspring of strength that never dries up. That is the essence of inner freedom, the power to remain your own master no matter what surrounds you." Marcus did not deny suffering. He transformed it into a teacher. This is the strength of Stoicism, not to seek calm by escaping the storm, but to learn how to stand in the rain without losing balance. The modern world, despite its comforts, suffers from a deeper crisis of the spirit. We can travel to other planets, yet fail to govern our own minds. We fear loss, rage at failure, and collapse under judgment. But Stoicism remains, like a beacon for those seeking themselves again. It reminds us that true freedom does not come from escaping hardship, but from no longer being ruled by it. When we learn to control our reactions instead of the events, to keep our composure instead of feeding our anger, then even in adversity, we remain free. And perhaps that is the greatest miracle the Stoics left us. The timeless truth that peace is not a reward, it is a choice. In Stoic philosophy, freedom is not an abstract concept. It is a disciplined state of mind, forged moment by moment. The Stoics understood that every human being is born with chains, fear, desire, and endless expectations that can never be satisfied. True freedom, they taught, begins when we patiently unfasten each of these chains through awareness and reason. For mastery over the outer world is impossible, but mastery over the inner world is entirely within reach. Epictetus reminded his students, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." That insight became the cornerstone of the Stoic path to peace. Because when we change the way we see the world itself changes in our eyes. The Stoics never denied that life is full of suffering. On the contrary, they saw it as an essential part of existence. But instead of fleeing from pain, they faced it with composure and understanding. When they lost something or someone they loved, they did not ask, "Why me?" but rather, "What can I learn from this?" That question transformed them into steady souls in the midst of storms. They understood that pain is not here to destroy, but to refine. Just as a rough stone shines only after friction, the human spirit matures through adversity. Inner freedom, therefore, is not a prize for those who live easily. It is the result of long spiritual training, in which one learns to befriend hardship rather than fear it. Seneca once said, "He who fears pain suffers more from fear than from the pain itself." The Stoics saw that most of our suffering comes not from reality, but from imagination. We ache because we believe we are not enough. We fear because we picture what has not yet happened. Yet life, through Stoic eyes, is not as terrifying as we make it. They teach us to live in the present moment, because the past is gone, the future is uncertain, and only now is truly ours. When we focus on living rightly in the present, fear dissolves. Anxiety lives in the future. Regret dwells in the past. But freedom exists only in the present, where we still have the power to choose our thoughts, our words, and our actions. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who carried an empire on his shoulders, found peace not in conquest, but in stillness. He wrote, "Freedom is the mind unshaken by things beyond its control." Amid wars and rebellions, he spent each night asking himself, "Have I lived in accordance with my nature today?" That question lies at the heart of Stoic freedom, to live in harmony with reason, virtue, and compassion. For when we live according to what is right, we are no longer torn between what we desire and what we know we should do. When the mind is no longer pulled by lust or fear, we enter true freedom, not the freedom to do whatever we want, but the freedom to choose what is right, even when it is hard. In today's world, where people are shaken by even the smallest disturbances, a headline, a comment, a brief failure, the Stoic spirit is a powerful remedy. It teaches that peace does not depend on the world, but on our ability to observe the world without being swept away by it. When we learn to stand apart from our emotions, watching them drift like clouds across the sky, we are no longer their slaves. Inner freedom is not the absence of emotion, but the knowledge that emotion no longer commands us. It is the highest form of awareness, a state the Stoics called ataraxia, the deep stillness of the soul, where nothing can disturb its quiet strength. Stoic philosophy does not teach people to become emotionless. It teaches them to feel rightly. The Stoics never denied sadness, fear, or anger. They simply learned not to let those emotions become the captains of their lives. They compared emotions to waves. If we resist them, they rise higher. But if we quietly observe, they pass without sinking the ship. Inner freedom begins with the ability to notice a wave as it rises, and instead of reacting, to understand it. When we are calm enough to see emotion as a phenomenon rather than our identity, we enter true peace. For it is not emotion that causes suffering. It is our identification with it. Epictetus told his students, "You cannot avoid emotions, but you can choose how to respond to them." In that single lesson, he revealed a path between two extremes, neither suppression nor indulgence, but observation guided by reason. When anger arises, the Stoic asks, "Will this anger help me act better?" When fear appears, they ask, "Is what I fear truly within my control?" These questions bring them back to the center of Stoic philosophy, the distinction between what we can and cannot control. Once that line is clear, the mind becomes uncluttered, no longer pulled apart by countless worries. And from that clarity emerges real freedom, not the absence of limits, but the wisdom to accept the limits that keep us aligned with reason. Seneca wrote, "You cannot stop emotions from arriving, but you can stop them from staying." He understood that life never promises calm, but one can create calm from within. A Stoic, whether in a noisy marketplace or on a blood-soaked battlefield, can keep the mind as still as a quiet lake. They train for that every day through self-observation, speaking with themselves, recording emotions, examining actions through the lens of reason. It is not repression, it is discipline. Just as muscles strengthen through pain, the mind strengthens through trial. And with every storm survived, one sees more clearly that peace is not something found outside, but something built through the persistent mastery of the self. Marcus Aurelius, in the midst of brutal wars, still took time each night to write his reflections, not for others to read, but to keep his soul from sinking into chaos. He wrote, "You cannot make the world gentle, but you can make your mind gentle." That reminder is a compass for anyone struggling in the modern world. When work, pressure, or disappointment push us toward despair, Stoicism does not tell us to run. It tells us to pause, breathe, and remember. This too shall pass. We are not meant to stop the waves, but to learn how to steer through them. And once we learn that, storms no longer terrify us, for we know they only make us stronger. Today's world might make peace seem like a luxury, but Stoicism proves the opposite. Peace has never been far away. It's only buried beneath the noise of the mind. When we silence the inner voices of blame, fear, and judgment, we begin to hear the sound of stillness again. That is the moment we realize that no matter how chaotic the world becomes, there is a place no one can touch, the trained mind, where true inner freedom lives. And once we taste that freedom, every hardship becomes just wind across the water. It may ripple the surface, but it will never sink the soul. To the Stoics, inner freedom was never a gift to be received. It was a state of mastery earned through discipline and awareness. It did not arrive in a single day, but was shaped through every small choice, every reaction, every thought. The Stoics believed that each time we choose calm over anger, understanding over judgment, gratitude over complaint, we move closer to freedom. They did not wait for perfect conditions to feel at peace, because they understood that circumstances were never the true enemy. It was our response to them that mattered. When we learn to take full responsibility for our emotions, blaming no one, we begin to see a simple truth. No one can make us suffer unless we allow them to. And that realization is the first step toward unshackling the soul. Epictetus taught, "You are free when you understand that you control your thoughts and actions, but not their outcomes." What may sound detached at first is actually the foundation of serenity. Most human suffering, he observed, comes from our desire to control what is beyond our reach. The weather, other people, fortune, or public opinion. When we pour our energy into what we cannot change, we lose the strength to change ourselves. The Stoic does not waste that energy. They focus their will entirely on the one thing they can govern, their response. That is why, even when the world collapses around them, they remain unshaken. For storms can only uproot what is weak. The mind trained in discipline stands firm. Seneca reminded us, "We suffer not from events, but from our interpretation of them." Within that insight lies the secret of spiritual freedom. We do not need to change the world, only how we perceive it. When loss arrives, the Stoic does not see punishment, but a lesson in impermanence. When betrayed, they do not claim victimhood, but an opportunity to practice patience and compassion. When wounded, they do not ask, "Why me?" but "How can I grow stronger from this?" In doing so, they transform pain into teacher and adversity into the forge of maturity. Inner freedom, then, is not the absence of suffering. It is the ability to walk through suffering without letting it scar the soul. Marcus Aurelius lived and died by this truth. As he watched the Roman Empire falter under war, plague, and rebellion, he wrote in Meditations, "If anything outside you can disturb your peace, the fault lies in yourself, for you have forgotten that your mind is a fortress no one can storm." The fortress of the mind became the defining image of Stoic thought. It was not a place to hide from life, but a stronghold from which to face it with steadiness. The Stoic does not build walls to shut out the world. They build them to guard reason from chaos. And as the world shifts, as power fades, as the body weakens, one thing remains untouched: the quiet peace within, a realm no force can invade. Today, in an age of speed and uncertainty, that lesson still echoes. We strive to control everything: our careers, reputations, social media, futures, and the harder we try, the more we exhaust ourselves. The Stoics offer a gentle reminder: start small, master your mind. When we govern our thoughts, everything else grows lighter. When we stop demanding that life must be different, we begin to see how beautiful it already is. And in that moment, amid noise, chaos, and unpredictability, we rediscover true freedom, not something found outside us, but within every mindful breath, every present choice, every calm realization that we are still here, still choosing, still at peace, even in the midst of the storm. Stoicism is not a philosophy of avoidance. It is a philosophy of confrontation. The Stoics never sought to erase suffering from life, for they understood that pain is a natural element of existence, just as rain belongs to the sky and winter to the turning of the year. They did not see hardship as an enemy, but as a stern teacher, imparting lessons that joy never could: endurance, humility, and growth. Inner freedom is not forged in comfort. It is born in the fire of trials. A soul that has never faced loss cannot know the meaning of letting go. A person who has never been betrayed cannot grasp the depth of forgiveness. And one who has never fallen cannot comprehend the power of rising again. The Stoic accepts their scars not as marks of tragedy, but as reminders that they have lived, fought, and evolved. Epictetus once said, Suffering does not come to harm you. It comes to remind you of who you are. It is a reminder of human nature itself, that within every pain lies the seed of awareness. The Stoic gazes directly into their suffering and sees the truth. Happiness is not found in avoiding adversity, but in choosing how to respond to it. When faced with loss, they do not despair. When insulted, they do not answer with hatred. When cast into darkness, they still keep the light of reason burning. They understand that the greatest danger is not the hardship itself, but allowing hardship to turn them into someone they are not. And so, each challenge becomes an opportunity to prove their character, to turn philosophy into action and knowledge into life. Seneca, who witnessed the collapse of glory and the betrayal of friends, told his students, "No one truly knows their strength until they have been tested." He looked upon hardship with calm eyes, knowing it was the necessary forge of the soul. In his letters to Lucilius, he did not urge escape from pain, but the courage to walk through it. He wrote, "When the wind rises, learn to set your sails stronger, not to wish for calmer seas." This spirit made Stoicism a philosophy of action, not merely of thought. It does not ask people to talk about virtue, but to live it. It does not demand that we speak of freedom, but that we train each day to keep the mind unbound. Marcus Aurelius, though an emperor, remained a humble student of philosophy. Each day he faced thousands of decisions, thousands of temptations of power, yet he chose simplicity, patience, and humility. He wrote, "You cannot escape pain, but you can face it as a human being." That single truth is the soul of Stoicism. Freedom is not the power to control the world. It is the power to control our response to it. And when one can smile amid chaos, give thanks amid loss, and love amid pain, then one has reached true inner freedom. No circumstance, no power, no fate can touch a soul that understands this. In today's world, where people so easily despair at uncertainty, the Stoic spirit burns brighter than ever. It reminds us that peace is not the privilege of the fortunate. It is the reward of those who train their minds. Storms may take away homes, possessions, and status, but they cannot sweep away a mind that has learned to stand firm. When we realize that everything external is temporary, but our mind is eternal, we begin to live lighter, braver, and kinder. For as the Stoic sages have shown across millennia, even in suffering, one can find serenity, not by fleeing the world, but by rediscovering the self within it. When the Stoics spoke of inner freedom, they were not describing a mystical state beyond human reach. They were describing a skill, something honed through discipline, self-observation, and patience. They believed that the mind, like the body, grows weak if not trained, easily conquered by emotion and circumstance. So each day, they practiced mental exercises, recording their emotions, reviewing their actions, asking whether they had lived by reason or been ruled by impulse. Seneca advised, "When night falls, inspect your mind as a farmer inspects his field. See what seeds you have sown, what weeds you have pulled, and what still needs care." This was how the Stoics kept their inner world clean, not through prayer, but through self-awareness, through radical honesty with themselves. Marcus Aurelius kept the same habit. His meditations were not written to teach others, but to reform himself. In them, he reminded his own heart, "Do not let your mind be carried away by what lies beyond control. Do not let others make you forget your own goodness." Those simple lines show the quiet power of inner discipline. The Stoic did not chase perfection. He sought daily progress. He knew that freedom was not born of sudden greatness, but of small victories. restraining one moment of anger, holding one careless word, overcoming one wave of weakness. Through such steady practice, they became free, not because they mastered the universe, but because they learned to master themselves. Epictetus taught, "Do not wish for events to happen as you desire. Wish instead to respond rightly to events as they are." That is the essence of flexibility, an indispensable facet of inner freedom. The Stoic does not try to force life to obey him. He learns to adjust himself to life. Like a skilled sailor, he cannot change the wind, but can trim the sail. His strength lies not in rigidity, but in adaptability. He may feel pain, but never despair, suffer defeat, but never collapse, lose much, but never curse fate. For he understands that life owes him nothing, yet always offers a chance to learn. And once the mind chooses to learn, even suffering becomes instruction rather than punishment. Seneca viewed adversity as part of nature to be met with courage. "Look upon suffering as the education of the soul," he wrote. Even in isolation and captivity, he sent letters filled with light, urging others to treat hardship as the forge of virtue. For when nothing external remains, one discovers what truly belongs to them: reason, dignity, and compassion. These three pillars, he said, are what allow a human being to stand firm amid storms. When the world collapses, but these remain intact, one is still free. Such freedom cannot be stolen, because it resides not in hands or possessions or titles, but in a soul illuminated by wisdom. Today, as humanity lives amid oceans of information and invisible pressures, the Stoic spirit is more vital than ever. It does not tell us to withdraw from the world, but to live within it without losing ourselves. It teaches us to pause before reacting, to breathe before speaking, to observe before judging. In practicing these simple acts, we realize that inner freedom is not a destination, but a journey, a return to the rational and compassionate essence of being human. On that journey, we need not become philosophers. We need only become mindful beings, seeing life with understanding rather than resentment. Then, even as the world tilts and trembles, our mind remains like an unflickering lamp, illuminating itself and quietly lighting the way for others. The Stoics saw life as a river, and human beings as small rowers carried along its current. We cannot stop the flow, nor command the direction of the water, but we can learn how to steer so that our boat is not swept away. Inner freedom works the same way. It is not the power to control everything, but the wisdom to live in harmony with nature, with the rational order of the universe. The Stoics believed that the cosmos itself is guided by logos, a divine logic, and that humans become truly free only when they align themselves with it. When we stop resisting what cannot be changed, we begin to feel a deep and quiet peace within. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be free, learn to want what is happening." One who understands this can smile even amid suffering, for they no longer see themselves as victims of life, but as its companions. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by the smoke and blood of battle, still wrote about gratitude and acceptance. Each morning, he reminded himself, "Today, I will meet the deceitful, the arrogant, the ungrateful. But I will not be angry, for they act as they do out of ignorance." That was not resignation, but the height of wisdom and compassion. The Stoic understood that we cannot change others' nature, but we can always choose our attitude toward them. Only when we stop demanding that the world be fair do we begin to see its beauty, not because it is perfect, but because we glimpse order within what seems chaotic. Such acceptance is not weakness. It is a form of soft strength. the kind that allows a person to stand firm without resistance, to love life without conditions. Seneca compared life to a play, in which each of us is given a role, some as kings, some as beggars, some as fleeting figures who appear and vanish. What matters is not whether your role is long or short, he wrote, but how well you perform it. This is the philosophy of conscious acceptance. The Stoic does not cling to outcomes. They focus on conduct. They do not ask, "Why must I endure this?" but rather, "Can I act virtuously within it?" That simple shift in questioning changes everything. They live not in resentment, but in mastery and calm. For they know that suffering does not come to destroy us, but to reveal the strength already hidden within, the strength of courage, endurance, and virtue, unbroken by hardship. Epictetus often urged his students to observe everything as if from the outside, without judgment or attachment. When something is lost, do not say, "I have lost it," but "It has been returned to where it belongs." When someone leaves, do not say, "I have been betrayed," but "That person has followed their own path." Such detachment frees the mind from the chains of possession. To the Stoics, everything in life, wealth, love, even time itself, is a temporary gift of the universe. When it comes, cherish it. When it goes, let it go. That act of letting go is what makes them free. For anyone who depends on what lies outside themselves remains a slave. True freedom begins when we understand that nothing truly belongs to us except how we live and how we love. Today, humanity is caught in the storm of endless wanting, the hunger to have more, to move faster, to stand out. But the Stoics remind us, the less you need, the freer you become. When we stop chasing desire, we rediscover the quiet beauty of simplicity, a breath, a calm morning, a sincere conversation. Inner freedom is not about having everything. It is about needing nothing to feel at peace. And in that simplicity, we find a forgotten truth. Peace is not a destination at the end of the road. It is the road itself, walked with gratitude, acceptance, and presence in every fleeting moment. Inner freedom, in the light of Stoicism, is not about escaping the world. It is about living within it without losing yourself. The Stoic does not seek silence in mountaintops or distant monasteries, but in the noise of the marketplace, amid dust, conflict, and contradiction. They understand that if peace exists only when life is easy, it is not peace at all. So they train their minds right where life happens, where noise, injustice, and uncertainty constantly test one's strength of spirit. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Amid the clamor, keep your mind as quiet as a room at rest." That single line is a compass for every Stoic. They do not search for quiet outside. They build it within. And once that inner stillness is built, nothing can break it. Epictetus told his students the story of a Roman soldier who, amid the blood and shouting of battle, could still breathe deeply, stay composed, and act with reason. He said, "Freedom does not come when you leave the battlefield. It comes when the battlefield no longer invades you." In today's world, the battlefield is no longer swords and spears. It is the workplace, the pressure, the screens, the invisible anxieties. Yet the essence is unchanged. Only when we can remain calm amid chaos do we become truly free. The Stoics teach that while we cannot choose our circumstances, we can always choose our attitude. When insulted, we may choose silence. When betrayed, forgiveness. When faced with loss, gratitude for what once was. And in those choices lies the power of inner freedom, the strength of being unconquered. Seneca called that power the wisdom of a matured soul. He wrote, "A peaceful mind can live among thunder without being disturbed." For him, tranquility was not a state of comfort, but a capacity for confrontation. The Stoic does not try to avoid pain. They learn to face it without fear. They understand that every emotion, no matter how fierce, has a beginning and an end. The key is not to dissolve into it. They observe it, understand it, and let it pass. Like a surfer who cannot stop the wave, but can learn to ride it, they learn to move with emotion instead of being drowned by it. In that mastery, they become invincible. Not because they are stronger than others, but because they understand themselves more deeply than anyone else. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Nowhere can you find peace more complete than within your own mind." A short line, yet enough to change the life of anyone who truly contemplates it. In an age where people search for peace in wealth, love, technology, or travel, the Stoic reminds us that what we seek has never been outside us. Peace does not come from escape, it comes from understanding. When we understand the nature of things, we are no longer ruled by them. When we understand our limits, we are freed from the illusion of control. And when we understand that everything eventually passes, we begin to live lightly, not because we have given up on the world, but because we have made peace with it. Today, as peace has become a commodity to be sold and branded, the Stoics still whisper a timeless truth. Real peace cannot be bought, proven, or praised. It needs only one thing: courage to face oneself. When we dare to look into our fears, our wounds, our shadows, we realize that everything we seek has been within us all along. Stoicism does not teach us to become cold. It teaches us to love life more deeply, to love with wisdom, with compassion, with gratitude. And when we love this way, life, no matter how harsh, can no longer take away the inner freedom we have found. The Stoics believe that while humans cannot control fate, they can always control how they receive it. That belief is what makes them unshakable amid life's endless upheavals. When everything collapses, others see loss. But the Stoic sees an opportunity to test virtue. When insulted, they see a chance to practice forgiveness. When illness strikes, they use it to cultivate patience. For them, no circumstance is meaningless, no hardship wasted, if it can be used for growth. Epictetus emphasized, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And in that reaction, in the way we choose our thoughts, our words, our actions, lies the true measure of inner freedom. Seneca wrote, "Hardship reveals character, just as storms prove the strength of a ship." That line captures the Stoic spirit more clearly than any philosophy could. We discover our true strength only when the wind rises. In comfort, anyone can speak nobly, but in loss, in pain, in betrayal, only those with disciplined souls remain kind and calm. The Stoic does not see life as a chain of random trials, but as a deliberate journey of refinement. They know that a blade becomes sharp only when forged in fire. And likewise, the human spirit must pass through adversity to become free. Marcus Aurelius, leading his armies through bitter winters, reminded himself in his journals, "When you suffer something, remember, it will not last forever. It will pass, as all things do." That was not comfort. It was truth from one who understood impermanence. The Stoic recognizes that pain has an expiration date, but how we meet it leaves a mark on the soul. Fear makes suffering linger. Resistance gives it power, but acceptance transforms it. When we stop fighting reality, we begin to separate from pain, to let it exist without letting it rule us. In that moment, freedom begins, not by defeating pain, but by standing apart from it. Epictetus taught, "You cannot control what happens, but you can control how you think about it." That principle is the cornerstone of spiritual autonomy. It turns a human being from a victim of circumstance into a creator of meaning. The Stoic looks at adversity and asks, "What can I make of this?" instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" The first question opens the path to action. The second breeds resentment. Happiness, they realized, does not lie in avoiding misfortune, but in using every experience, even the bitter ones, to become wiser and more compassionate. In this way, the Stoic transforms what was meant to destroy them into the very fire that shapes their character. Though the wars of Rome have ended, every human being today still fights their own battles, with pressure, with pain, with their own restless mind. And that is why Stoicism endures. It does not promise escape from suffering. It teaches how to live within suffering without losing dignity. Inner freedom does not come from denying pain. It comes from understanding that pain does not define you. When we accept hardship without resentment, we cease to be passive victims and become masters of our own souls. And once we understand that, every event in life becomes an opportunity to practice that freedom. The freedom of a spirit unshackled by fear or hatred, steadfast in the quiet strength of its own understanding. The Stoics never denied fear. They simply refused to let it rule their lives. In every age, fear has been humanity's invisible chain. Fear of loss, of failure, of judgment, of loneliness, of death. But Stoic philosophy teaches that inner freedom begins the moment we look fear in the eye. When we avoid it, fear grows in the dark. When we illuminate it with reason, we see it for what it is: small, fleeting, powerless. Marcus Aurelius once asked himself, "What is it that I fear? Is it death itself, or my thoughts about death?" And he answered, "It is not death that frightens me, but my opinion of it." That realization freed him, and generations after him, from the tyranny of fear. For nothing is truly terrifying except the imagination running wild within the mind. Epictetus said, "You fear loss because you forget that nothing truly belongs to you." When we accept that everything, from our body and possessions to those we love, and even life itself, is only a temporary gift of the universe, fear loses its hold. For when we no longer cling, we no longer dread losing. The Stoic does not try to possess. They learn to appreciate without attachment, to love without control. They understand that true freedom begins when we can let go and remain at peace. That is the greatness of this philosophy. It does not teach us to master the world, but to live within it without letting it master us. Inner freedom, therefore, is not victory over others. It is triumph over oneself. In his final letters, Seneca wrote a line that has silenced generations in awe. "He who accepts death has ceased to fear life." To him, facing death was not a descent into nothingness, but the ultimate lesson in freedom. Death is as natural as night following day. The Stoic does not dread it because they see it as a return to nature, to the order that gave them life. They believe life and death are two notes in the same cosmic melody. And only when we stop fearing death do we begin to live without haste, without regret, without anxiety. Each day becomes a gift, not because it is endless, but because it is fleeting. In that fragility, they learn gratitude, love, and presence, to exist fully in each breath. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "When you wake, remember, This day may be your last. But do not fear. Live as though it were given to you once more. His words do not inspire despair. They awaken gratitude. The Stoic lives not to prolong time, but to fill it. They know we cannot control the length of life, but we can control its depth. In every mindful moment, when they breathe, feel, and think, they find a freedom richer than power or wealth, awareness. To know that we need not possess the world to love it wholeheartedly, that is the core of their serenity. In a world obsessed with control, of futures, careers, people, even emotions, Stoicism whispers, let go. Letting go is not surrender. It is the acceptance that no one commands everything. And in that release, something miraculous happens. We see the one thing we can command, ourselves. Inner freedom thus becomes the highest form of liberty, a state where we are no longer bound by fear, ambition, or the illusion of control. When our mind ceases to be enslaved by what lies beyond our reach, life itself becomes vast and light. We still live, strive, and love, but we are no longer consumed by them. And that is the peace the Stoics sought all their lives, the quiet freedom of a soul that belongs only to itself. Inner freedom does not come from avoiding emotions, but from understanding and mastering them. The Stoic does not deny anger, sadness, or fear. They simply refuse to let these emotions dictate their actions. They see emotions as clouds drifting across the sky of the mind. You don't have to chase them away, only avoid clinging to them. Epictetus once said, "No one makes you angry, you choose to be angry." His words were not about blame, but empowerment, a reminder that we always have the power to choose our response. When we see emotions not as enemies, but as signals guiding us towards self-knowledge, we begin to gain control of our inner life. The Stoic learns to feel without losing reason, like a sailor who uses the wind to steer forward instead of letting it sink his ship. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "If someone wrongs you, remember, they act that way because they do not know better. If you respond with hatred, you become like them." For him, forgiveness was not an act of morality, but an expression of wisdom. The wise do not waste their energy fighting what cannot be changed. They know that anger is like holding a burning coal to throw at someone. The one burned first is yourself. That is why the Stoic releases hatred, not out of weakness, but to protect their inner peace. When they remain calm amid injustice, they prove that inner freedom is not a theory, but a daily discipline of strong souls. Seneca said, "No one can harm me without my consent." This was not arrogance, but truth understood by one who saw that all pain begins in interpretation. When someone insults you, you can choose to believe them, or choose to see them with compassion. When you lose something, you can choose grief, or gratitude for having had it. These small choices define freedom. The Stoic does not live under the illusion that they can control the world, but they believe, absolutely, that they can control how they see it. And that belief keeps them from ever being victims of circumstance, no matter how cruel life may seem. One of the most famous Stoic practices is premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of misfortune. Each morning, they would imagine all that could go wrong that day: insults, loss, illness, even the death of loved ones. Not to despair, but to prepare. For when misfortune arrived, they were ready. They did not react with shock or bitterness, but with calm acceptance, knowing that all things in life are temporary. This mental training allowed the Stoics to remain serene amid uncertainty. They did not pray for luck. They prayed for clarity to face whatever came with peace. That is the foundation of inner freedom, not the avoidance of pain, but friendship with it. Today, when people are ruled by emotions more than ever, by news, social media, and instant praise or criticism, the Stoic spirit is invaluable. It teaches us not to react instantly, not to be dragged into the whirlpool of rage and fear. When we learn to pause, to observe, and then respond with reason, we are living Stoicism in the modern world. And when we do so, we not only find peace for ourselves, but spread it to others. For inner freedom, when refined to its purest form, does not liberate one person alone. It illuminates everyone around them through the quiet light of understanding, compassion, and serenity. One of the reasons Stoic philosophy has endured for thousands of years is that it never promises easy happiness. It offers a path to genuine peace, the path of reason, discipline, and gratitude. The Stoic does not believe suffering can be erased, only that it can be lived with dignity. They see suffering as fire, and the human mind as iron. The more it is tempered, the brighter and stronger it becomes. When we accept pain as a natural part of life, we no longer fear it. Epictetus said, "It is not adversity that weakens us, but our useless resistance to it." The Stoic does not flee from pain. They walk through it with courage, knowing that on the other side of suffering lies freedom. Freedom from illusion, from fear, from the fragile self that once enslaved us. Seneca emphasized, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Indeed, most of human pain does not come from what happens, but from the stories we tell ourselves about it. When we are hurt, we suffer not only from the wound, but from the thoughts built around it. Why me? I don't deserve this. It will never get better. The Stoic sees this truth and chooses differently. They do not deny pain, but separate it from interpretation. An event is just an event, neither good nor bad, until we assign it meaning. And when we choose a wiser meaning, we transform what could have destroyed us into an opportunity for growth. That is where inner freedom is born, when we cease to be slaves to our thoughts and become their creators instead. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, often reminded himself, "All things will fade: praise, blame, glory, and pain." For him, the awareness of impermanence was not a cause for despair, but a call to cherish the present. When we truly know everything is fleeting, we stop wasting time in resentment and stop being dragged down by the trivial. The Stoic lives each day as if it were their last, not in fear, but in fullness. They love, work, and give without attachment to results, because they know outcomes are beyond control. That letting go is what sets them free amid the bindings of life. They do not cling to what is not theirs, for they know all things are returning to where they began, including us. Epictetus once used the image of a ship to describe life. He said, "When the ship is anchored, go ashore, collect water, gather flowers, enjoy the view, but never forget that the captain's call may come at any moment. When it does, be ready to return without regret." It is a profound lesson in non-attachment. Enjoy life deeply, but remember it is temporary. When the time comes to let go, smile. True freedom lies not in holding on, but in being ready to release. The Stoic does not reject the world. They love it freely, without demand, without possession, without fear. And for that reason, they love more deeply than anyone, because their love is untouched by anxiety. Today, people easily lose that freedom amid endless cravings for wealth, power, validation. But Stoicism reminds us, the less we need, the freer we are. When we no longer depend on others' approval, when we no longer need everything to go our way, When we feel gratitude for even the smallest things, we step into the peace so many spend their lives chasing. Inner freedom is not a distant ideal for philosophers. It is something anyone can touch, simply by pausing, breathing, and asking, do I control my mind, or does my mind control me? When we answer that question with awareness, life immediately changes, and suffering, from that moment on, becomes nothing more than a gentle teacher guiding the awakening of the soul. Stoic philosophy never asks us to retreat from the world. It teaches us how to live within it, with strength and compassion. The Stoic does not isolate themselves in solitude. They walk among people without letting the world dissolve their essence. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We are born for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth." His words capture the Stoic sense of deep interconnectedness, a philosophy that looks inward yet always reaches outward. Inner freedom is not indifference. It is the art of loving without losing oneself. When we realize that every person we meet is struggling with invisible burdens, we begin to treat them with empathy instead of judgment. And in that empathy, we too are freed from our own harshness. Epictetus often told his students, "If someone acts wrongly, do not be angry. Think instead that he has simply not yet learned what you have learned." This is how the Stoic views the world, not through division, but through understanding. They see others not as enemies, but as fellow souls on the same path of learning. With this perspective, they remain calm even when insulted, betrayed, or misunderstood. They feel no need to win every argument, for they understand that true victory is maintaining serenity within. The Stoic chooses silence when others shout, compassion when others rage, and understanding when others condemn. In those quiet choices lies their highest power, the power of self-mastery. Seneca saw kindness as the root of freedom. He wrote, "No one is free who cannot love others. Humanity is bound until it transcends selfishness, until it sees itself reflected in others." For Seneca, compassion is not a luxury, but the mark of a mature mind. The Stoic never uses personal suffering as an excuse to close the heart. Instead, they take it as an invitation to open it wider, to share in the common pain of humankind. They know that whether emperor or slave, rich or poor, all are governed by the same laws of life: birth, love, loss, and death. Awareness of this equality before fate makes them humble and gentle in all they do. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When someone does wrong, ask yourself, have I never done the same?" That question is a mirror of mercy. The Stoic does not place themselves above others. They see in others' mistakes their own past reflection, and so they forgive, not only out of goodness, but out of gratitude. For every flaw they witness is a reminder that growth never ends. They believe forgiveness does not weaken us, it frees us. Hatred is simply another kind of chain. To let go of resentment is to step out of darkness toward the light of peace. On that path, compassion becomes the doorway to the deepest freedom the soul can know. Today, in a world full of conflict, where people clash over differences, Stoicism rises again as a gentle reminder. Freedom cannot exist without compassion. A closed heart is never a free heart. When we learn to look upon others with empathy, we release ourselves from bitterness and prejudice. Inner freedom, then, is not just a state of reason. It is an expansion of the heart. The Stoic lives not only wisely, but kindly. They know the greatest freedom is to love without fear, to give without demand, and to smile even when the world does not understand. That is the freedom of a soul that has risen above the small confines of the self. Stoic philosophy does not promise an escape from life. It teaches us how to live within it, awake and unbroken. Its goal is not to flee the world, but to move through it without being consumed by it. The Stoic views each day as a training ground for the mind, a place to practice responding with reason, speaking with restraint, and acting with goodwill. Epictetus compared life to a stage. You may not choose your role, but you can choose how to play it. Thus, the Stoic does not hide from their part, whether soldier, farmer, father, or exile. They fulfill their duties without being defined by their titles. And in that detachment lies freedom, for they refuse to let the role define the soul. Marcus Aurelius understood the fragility of power. As emperor, he could command legions, but not his own mind, unless disciplined. So he trained himself daily, like a student of life. In Meditations, he wrote, "When you are angry, remember you are human. When you are proud, remember you will die." Such reminders kept his ego in check. To the Stoic, humility is the foundation of freedom, for only the humble can learn, and only those who learn can grow. They do not seek to control others, but themselves. They do not strive to prove they are right, but to understand why others are wrong. And in that quiet introspection, they discover something remarkable. When we stop trying to change others, the world itself begins to breathe easier. Seneca emphasized that the wise live according to nature, not in blind submission to fate, but in harmony with reason and reality. The Stoic does not fight what cannot be changed, nor do they surrender. They act with full intent, then accept the outcome with serenity. This is not passivity. It is mastery in its highest form, to act with complete will and to let go with complete peace. When one achieves that state, they free themselves from both extremes, arrogance in success and despair in failure. They understand that worth is not measured by results, but by the attitude with which one faces them. Epictetus often taught, "Keep your mind clear like a mirror, so that when the world reflects upon it, you see things as they truly are." Inner freedom begins with that clarity. When we perceive life without the distortions of fear, greed, or illusion. The Stoic does not live to suppress emotions, but to understand them. They know that emotions, when illuminated by reason, can become creative power. Anger can transform into courage. Sorrow can become compassion. But without control, they become chains of the spirit. Thus, the Stoic does not seek to eliminate emotion, but to govern it, to let feelings serve reason, not rule it. In mastering that balance, they find equanimity, neither cold nor fragile, a state we might today call stillness in motion. In our modern world, where people are swept up in the rush of speed and expectation, Stoic philosophy offers a simple reminder. Freedom is not about how much we have, but how little we need to feel content. When we reduce our desires, we restore our natural peace. When we stop seeking attention, we finally begin to be heard. When we stop chasing outcomes, we begin to enjoy the journey. The Stoic does not search for happiness, they live it. Not because they suffer less, but because they understand that suffering is part of happiness. And when they learn to harmonize the two, life becomes whole, not perfect, but profoundly real. The Stoics have always believed that life is a practice, not a theory. Their philosophy was never meant to be read. It was meant to be lived. They did not talk about virtue in books. They trained it through daily action, in how they listened, how they faced hardship, how they treated others. Seneca wrote, "No philosophy is useful unless it makes a man better every day." For the Stoics, wisdom was not contemplation alone, but constant exercise of courage, patience, gratitude, and self-control. They saw every event in life as a test, and if one could keep calm in adversity, compassion in resentment, and reason in chaos, then they had advanced one step closer to inner freedom. Epictetus, once a slave, understood freedom more deeply than most. He said, "No man is free unless he is master of himself. No one can imprison your mind unless you allow it." That idea became the essence of his life and of Stoic philosophy itself. Though beaten, chained, and deprived of all rights, he remained serene. He did not see himself as a victim, but as an observer of his own pain. For him, the body could be controlled, but never the mind. And in that darkest place, he discovered the deepest form of liberty, a freedom even kings might never know. Thus, inner freedom does not depend on rank or circumstance, but on the clarity of one's awareness. Marcus Aurelius, seated on the throne of an empire, learned the same lesson. He proved that freedom is not reserved for the oppressed. It is also the test of those who wield power. In Meditations, he reminded himself, "Fame is fleeting, glory will fade, only virtue endures." When the most powerful man on earth admitted that truth, he did not grow weaker. He transcended power itself. The Stoic is not blinded by wealth, nor broken by poverty. They learn to live in the world but not of it, present within life yet not possessed by it. That is the mark of absolute freedom, to act with reason and compassion regardless of what surrounds you. Seneca once wrote in a letter, "I cannot teach a man to be free if I myself am still afraid." Fear is the silent enemy of the soul. The Stoics trained to confront every fear of loss, pain, or death. They understood that fear lives only in imagination, and only reason can dissolve it. When you dare to face what frightens you most, you find it was only a shadow. From that confrontation rises true courage, not the loud, defiant kind, but the quiet strength to stand firm in the storm. The Stoic does not avoid the storm. They learn to stand within it. And in what seems their weakest moment, they become their strongest, because they have conquered themselves. Today, as people grow weary in a world too fast and too loud, Stoicism feels more relevant than ever. It reminds us, we don't need to control everything, only our minds. We don't need to understand the whole world, only ourselves. We don't need to change others, only our reactions. When we do, we realize that life will always bring storms, but the storms can no longer sweep us away. Deep within, we have built a refuge for the soul, a fortress of peace that nothing can breach. And when we step into the world from that place, we are truly free, free to love, to live, to forgive, and to smile at the things that once made us afraid. Inner freedom is not born from avoidance. It is forged through deep confrontation with oneself. The Stoic does not turn to philosophy to escape life, but to live it more completely. They know that one cannot outpace suffering by running from it. One transcends it only by facing it directly. Epictetus once said, "If you wish for peace, do not pray for calmer seas, but for the strength to sail through the storm." That single line captures the essence of Stoicism. We cannot control the world around us, but we can strengthen the soul that meets it. And when that strength is found, the world remains the same, but the way we move through it changes entirely. During the chaos of his reign, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "My happiness depends not on what others do, but on what I think of them. He realized that most human suffering does not arise from events, but from the meaning we assign to them. A word can wound us only if we choose to believe it. A failure can destroy us only if we let it define us. The Stoic learns to separate events from emotions, to stand like a witness outside the storm, watching it come and go without being swept away. They are not unfeeling, but awake. That awareness is the foundation of freedom, knowing what lies within our control and what does not. When we stop wasting energy on the unchangeable, we begin to live with lightness, depth, and peace. Seneca warned, "Nothing makes us more miserable than living by the opinions of others." In the age of social media, his words ring truer than ever. Too many have made their minds slaves to approval, to likes, praise, and fleeting validation. We celebrate when others applaud, despair when they criticize, forgetting that our emotions are being ruled by strangers. The Stoic chooses another path. They do not seek recognition. They seek alignment between action and principle. They live by the standard of virtue, not popularity. And because of that, even when misunderstood or alone, they remain serene. They do not need agreement to feel worthy, for their worth comes from within, not from applause. Epictetus urged his students to imagine a life where no one could insult them, not because the world had grown kinder, but because they had stopped granting others the power to wound them. He said, "If you wish to be free, learn to care neither for praise nor for blame." True freedom begins the moment we no longer live to please others, when we know who we are and what truly matters. The noise around us loses its hold. The Stoics called this stillness in motion, the ability to remain centered and lucid even amid chaos. Then we no longer need to withdraw from the world. We can walk through it with a mind steady as stone. That is the image of the Stoic in an age of turmoil, calm yet powerful, silent yet radiant, like a lamp that does not flicker in the wind. Today, in a world racing against time and drowning in distraction, inner freedom has become a rare luxury. Yet Stoicism reminds us we do not need a quiet world to find peace, only a mind that is not disturbed. When we stop trying to control what lies beyond our reach, when we accept impermanence as the law of life, we touch a deeper kind of peace. That peace is not the absence of pain, but the presence of wisdom. Once we understand that life is constant change, we stop clinging, and with that, the fear of loss fades away. And in that moment, when we feel gratitude simply for breathing, for existing, for seeing the morning light, we touch the freedom so many seek, the freedom of a soul that has learned to accept and to love the world exactly as it is. Stoic philosophy teaches us how to face impermanence, a truth that most people fear. Everything in life changes: health, wealth, status, loved ones, even the self we think we are. But the Stoic does not run from that truth. They welcome it with calm acceptance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "All that you love will change, and you yourself are changing." For him, impermanence was not a tragedy, but the universe's quiet beauty, because through change, we learn to cherish. Once we understand that everything is temporary, we no longer despair in loss or cling in joy. We learn to love without possession, to live without fear, and to let go without resentment. In that understanding, peace blossoms, not because life is eternal, but because we have stopped resisting its natural flow. Epictetus once said, "When you kiss your child, remember that it is a mortal being. If one day it should die, you will not suffer beyond what is natural." At first, this sounds cold, but it is, in truth, the purest form of love. love unbound by fear. The Stoic loves deeply, but never possessively. To them, loving someone does not mean holding on. It means honoring them while they are here. That is why, when they lose someone, they grieve but do not collapse, for they have loved fully. They refuse to let fear of loss steal the joy of the present. To live this way, to love without fear, to give without demand, to lose without bitterness, is to enter the purest form of freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of time and the obsession with holding on. Seneca viewed impermanence through the eyes of one who had tasted both glory and ruin. He wrote, "Nothing is truly ours, not the body, not possessions, not even our friends. All are borrowed from the universe for a while." That belief gave him serenity, even in the face of death. In his final hours, he taught his students, "Death takes nothing from us. It only returns what was never ours." His calmness did not come from cold detachment, but from wisdom. The Stoic does not deny sorrow. They simply refuse to let sorrow enslave them. Once we accept that everything arrives and departs by natural law, we no longer fear loss. And when fear dissolves, we finally know love, not as ownership, but as companionship. Marcus Aurelius reflected, "Everything is in flux, and so am I. Welcome this as part of nature's order." He saw change not as an enemy, but as the rhythm of the cosmos, and the Stoic seeks to move in harmony with that rhythm. To resist impermanence is as futile as fighting the tide. The wise learn to flow with life without being swept away. They know that clinging to what must pass brings pain, while letting go brings peace. This acceptance, amor fati, or love of fate, is among Stoicism's highest ideals. It does not ask us to surrender to fate, but to love it, to see every joy and hardship as part of the grand design of becoming human. In today's fast-moving world, where everything changes in a blink, from relationships to fame, the Stoic view of impermanence is more precious than ever. It invites us to pause, to breathe, and to stop losing the present in the chase for what's next. When we see that nothing lasts forever, we stop fearing change and begin to savor it. When we feel gratitude for each fleeting moment, we no longer grieve what's gone. And when we realize that even pain is temporary, we begin to live with courage and freedom. The freedom of one who understands that life need not last forever to be beautiful, only to be lived fully, one conscious breath at a time. In their pursuit of inner freedom, the Stoics discovered that true happiness does not come from gaining more, but from needing less. They looked upon a world obsessed with status, wealth, and power, and saw that the more people have, the more they fear. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of being replaced. But when we loosen our grip on desire, fear loses its power over us. Epictetus said, "The rich man is not the one who has much, but the one who needs little." For the Stoics, simplicity is the summit of freedom. When the mind is no longer ruled by possessions, we begin to see what truly matters: reason, kindness, peace. And when desire no longer binds us, life opens up, clear, light, and free, like water flowing downstream. Marcus Aurelius lived in the splendor of a palace, yet wrote in his journal, "Do not let the glitter of the world make you forget that happiness lies within the mind." He understood that luxury cannot buy serenity, for peace is not found in what we own, but in how we perceive what we have. The Stoic cultivates the art of enoughness, the wisdom to stop, to be grateful for the smallest things. When a simple meal, a breath of clean air, or a quiet morning feels like a blessing, one has already reached profound freedom. Fulfillment of the heart makes one independent of circumstance. He who desires little is never poor, for he possesses what even the richest rarely find: contentment. Seneca called this virtue regal poverty, the inner wealth of one who lives simply. He wrote, "Live like a poor man in times of wealth, so that when poverty comes, you lose nothing." The Stoic does not fear poverty, for they have already practiced sufficiency. They do not need abundance to feel free, because freedom comes from detachment, not deprivation. The fewer the needs, the fewer the chains. The fewer the desires, the fewer the wounds. The Stoic does not reject the joys of life. They simply refuse to become addicted to them. They enjoy without clinging, appreciate without depending. And in that balance, they achieve what every civilization has sought: lasting tranquility. Epictetus urged his students to learn self-mastery amid abundance. He said, "When you can touch gold without letting it stick to your hands, then you are free." A simple image, yet profound. Freedom is not the rejection of wealth, but the ability to remain unbound by it. The Stoic lives in the ordinary world, with work, family, and friendship, but moves through it with awareness. They can enjoy fine wine without drunkenness, receive praise without pride, succeed without losing themselves. Moderation in all things is their art of living, for extremity, whether in joy or grief, is the enemy of freedom. The Stoic does not escape life. They harmonize with it, in mindfulness and gratitude. Today, in a world that urges us to want more, Stoicism invites us to want less, not to extinguish ambition, but to choose it wisely. When we pause to ask, do I truly need this? Or do I want it because others do? Awakening begins. When comparison ends, suffering ends. When competition fades, freedom begins. Simplicity is not scarcity. It is the soul's wealth, where we have enough, know it is enough, and feel joy simply for being, not owning. Inner freedom, to the Stoic, is not about fleeing the material world, but about living within it with a light heart. And when we learn to do that, every hardship becomes a lesson, to live deeper, calmer, and freer with each passing day. The Stoics understood that in every situation, we face two choices: to complain or to grow, and they always chose the latter. They believed that every challenge, no matter how small, is an opportunity to strengthen the soul. Epictetus said, "When you face difficulty, be grateful, for God is giving you a chance to practice your philosophy." For the Stoics, philosophy was not confined to books. It was lived through our reactions to insult, rejection, and pain. Each time we remain calm instead of angry, forgive instead of retaliate, accept instead of resent, we take one step closer to freedom. In that quiet discipline, the Stoic finds a subtle joy, the joy of becoming steadier, wiser, and kinder than the person they were yesterday. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "No one can make me act contrary to my own nature." That truth forms one of the foundations of inner freedom. For freedom is not merely independence from others, it is liberation from the darker parts of oneself. The Stoic's greatest enemy is not the world, but the ungoverned self. They train to master anger, to extinguish arrogance, and to dissolve fear. They understand that if one loses the battle within, no external victory can compensate. But if one masters the self, then even stripped of everything, one remains free. The highest freedom is to live according to the goodness and reason within us, to be untouched by impulsive emotion, unled by blind desire, uncorrupted by hate. Seneca wrote, No harm can come to a soul that remains pure. This is not a statement of faith. It is a declaration of inner dignity. The Stoic accepts that the world can be cruel, people can betray, and fate can be unjust. But none of these can touch the core of one's spirit unless permission is granted. They refuse to let the wrongdoing of others make them wicked. They refuse to let injustice turn them bitter. Instead, they choose virtue as their highest form of defiance. To them, goodness is not weakness. It is strength refined by endurance. Only the truly strong can remain kind in a world that tests them. And in that unwavering moral clarity, they reach a form of freedom higher than power itself. The freedom of a soul that cannot be conquered. Epictetus told his students, "If someone insults you, remember that he is acting according to his understanding." This is not naivety, it is wisdom at its peak. The Stoic does not demand perfection from the world, for they know that people are bound by ignorance and fear. When someone behaves cruelly, they do not rage, they feel compassion, for the offender is trapped in the darkness of his own mind. Forgiveness, then, is not a gift to others, but liberation for oneself from the chains of hatred. When we no longer need to strike back, we have already won. When we can smile at what once wounded us, we are free. And in a world of endless conflict, that freedom is rarer and more precious than victory. Today, as modern life makes us quick to anger, easy to disappoint, and fragile to offense, Stoic philosophy remains as relevant as ever. It teaches us, do not wish for an easier world, train for a stronger soul. Do not wait for others to change, master yourself. When we command our thoughts, we are no longer swept away by the storms of emotion. When we preserve reason, we stop fearing chaos. And when we live with kindness, we are never alone. For we are aligned with the brightest part of humanity. That is when inner freedom ceases to be an idea and becomes a way of life, the way of one who not only survives the world, but quietly illuminates it through their own peace. As the Stoic journey reaches its end, it leaves humanity not with promises of heaven or reward, but with a lamp, one that illuminates the inner path. The Stoics understood that life is not something to be controlled, but something to be experienced with awareness. They lived knowing that each day is a chance to practice patience in hardship, gratitude in fortune, calmness in insult, and compassion toward those who suffer more than themselves. Their philosophy was not dry theory. It breathed with life itself. It did not demand retreat from the world, but taught how to love it more deeply, to love with understanding, to love with clarity, and to love in freedom. Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, three great souls of Stoicism, stood at three ends of society: slave, statesman, and emperor. Yet they all arrived at the same truth: they were free. For freedom, in its truest sense, has nothing to do with circumstance. A man can be imprisoned and still free if his mind is unshackled. Another may possess the world and remain a slave if bound by desire, fear, or hatred. The Stoic does not seek to rule others, but to liberate himself. They live as warriors of the spirit, fighting not with swords, but with reason and kindness. In the quiet of awareness, they discovered what humanity still chases. Peace is not found outside, but in harmony, between human and nature, between action and principle, between presence and acceptance. Seneca wrote, "The free man is one who fears not tomorrow." That line captures the essence of Stoic philosophy: to accept the past, act in the present, and allow the future to unfold as it must. The Stoic does not worry about what has not yet arrived, nor mourn what has passed, because they know only this moment is real. They live in the present, not out of indifference, but out of wisdom. For the present is the only ground on which the future can stand. When we do well with what is here, what will come will take care of itself. When we stop resisting time, we begin to live in rhythm with it. And in that rhythm lies true freedom, not something given or taken, but something realized the moment we accept that we own nothing except our mind, and that is enough. In the final pages of Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote as if bidding farewell to the world. When you rise in the morning, be thankful for the privilege of seeing light, of breathing, of thinking, of loving. Simple words, yet they hold the full heart of Stoicism. Gratitude for existence itself, fragile though it is. To the Stoic, life need not be perfect to be precious. It only needs to be lived with reverence and awareness. When we are thankful for each breath, each drop of water, each human encounter, we no longer demand that life be different. And in that realization, freedom is no longer something to seek. It becomes the very air we breathe. That is the purest freedom, the freedom of a soul that knows all can fade. But peace and kindness are immortal. Today, in a world that trembles with noise and confusion, Stoicism remains a lighthouse for wandering hearts. It does not tell us to silence emotion, but to understand it. It does not urge us to flee suffering, but to walk through it with serenity. It does not promise a life without storms, but it teaches us how to stand firm within them. When we learn this, life ceases to be a series of fears and becomes a journey of becoming. And when we look back, we see that the greatest gift Stoicism left us is not a list of doctrines, but a gentle reminder. We are truly free only when we realize that nothing belongs to us forever, except the mind that knows how to love, to understand, and to remain at peace amid the tempests of life.